substances can completely warp your mindset. Seriously, the consumption of substances can completely warp your mindset. Yo, I'm your man, Coach Mike D, back with another episode of the Mindset QB, where I'm not your mindset QB. I'm here to encourage and inspire you to become the quarterback of your own mindset. So dig this, man. If you listen to one of the 5 components of having a solid mindset, it's your beliefs, your experiences, your relationships, the stories you tell yourself, and how you view yourself, right? Under the bucket of experiences, consumption of substances falls. In society, we are encouraged to consume. We are encouraged to consume stuff in stores. We're encouraged to consume various articles of clothing. We're encouraged to consume various foods. We're encouraged to consume various drinks, and we're encouraged to take various drugs and different medicines. Like, all around us, there are these messages encouraging us to consume, right? There's an interesting thing here. If you do some reading of like old text, right, from like back in the 1700s, you'll see that there was a very popular disease that had the name consumption. Now, it was tuberculosis, right? But if you look at they would say a person died from consumption. And I always found it interesting how tuberculosis was called consumption at that time. But then when I look at what's going on in our life and in society, how a lot of people today are being killed or dying or having their mindset completely thrown off due to consumption. And so I want to speak specifically to substances like alcohol and drugs, right? When you think about alcohol is not illegal in most places around the world, especially when you're over a certain age. Alcohol is marketed to us as something to, loosen up, to have a good time, to help, make the party better, right? And it's interesting, growing up, I didn't really drink as a kid. I got to college and everything kind of changed at that point. And it really got to a point in which, we couldn't kick it. We couldn't party unless we pre-gamed, right? Meaning we went and got to the drink before we actually got to the party, right? Everything changed. And then as adults, if you really pay attention to adult-centered events, whether it's a black tie gala, hanging out with the fellas, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. A lot of times alcohol's at the cornerstone, or is kind of a centerpiece of your hanging out, or it's a centerpiece to your recreational activities. And it's just interesting because that is a message that gets perpetually fed to us, that we need alcohol to have a good time. Now, I'll have a drink every so often. I'll have a cocktail when my wife and I go out for dinner, right? Like this, I don't think there's anything wrong with having it. You just can't get to a point in which it has you. That's the issue. And in today's day and age, and when we're thinking about becoming the quarterback of your mindset, we have to realize that consumption, like back in the day, how tuberculosis was called consumption, people died from consumption. People die from consumption today. But even if they don't physically die, their mindset gets killed or warped due to the consumption of various substances. And I want to encourage everybody out here that, if you choose to go down the path of consuming alcohol or whatnot, you need to have a few things in mind, right? And there are 4 points that I want to highlight: source, company, volume, and environment. So if you choose to go down the rabbit hole of consuming alcohol, make sure you start with understanding the source of where this alcohol came from. Because again, there are so many things going on today. There are so many scenarios in which there are tainted things that we're putting into our body. So you need to be in a place or in an environment in which you can trust the source of that thing that you're consuming. Again, I'm here to help you become the mindset quarterback for your own life. And if we're not careful, the things that we consume can take us off of that path and will remove our ability to become our own mindset quarterback. So you need to be mindful. If you choose to have a drink, if you choose to have an adult beverage, so to speak, make sure that you can recognize the source. You know where it came from. You know that what you're consuming is what they say it is, correct? That's something to be very mindful of. Remember, 4 things we're going to talk about here. Source. The next one is company. I can look back and I can tell you it's only by the grace of God that I made it out of various situations that I potentially put myself in due to consumption or overconsumption or binge drinking, during the college era or right after college era of my life. Because sometimes you are consuming so much alcohol and you're not necessarily in the company of people who have your best interest at heart. And again, like I said, it's for me, it's by the grace of God that I'm sitting here today, because there are situations and circumstances that could have gone totally different. We see news stories all the time about somebody who was inebriated and his friend group or her friend group left them somewhere and something happened to them, or they had an accident, they fell off a bridge or something somewhere. It's just the company you keep is extremely important. So if you choose to go down the rabbit hole of consuming an adult beverage, make sure that you're aware of the source, but then also be aware of the company you keep. Everybody around you does not have your best interest at heart. If things go left, are the people around you going to be there to protect you, or are you going to get left out to dry? Do people around you have malicious intent? Like, we're seeing stories now where individuals are getting caught up in scandals. They're getting recorded saying things that they probably would not have said if they were sober, but that's because they consumed and they were in the company of people who had malicious intent. Again, there are going to be 4 things. If you choose to go down this rabbit hole, again, I'm here to encourage you to be the mindset QB, and drinking and substances are a slippery slope. But if you choose to make those choices and you're choosing to do so with sound mind, you need to make sure that there are a few things you consider. Remember, the source, the company you keep. Next is volume. It's interesting, even through the lens of the Bible, Jesus turned water into wine. That was like one of his first miracles that we had access to, that was documented, from a biblical perspective. But when you stop and you think about it, the Bible doesn't say that drinking is a sin, but it does say a person who drinks to get drunk is a fool, right? So when you start thinking about that, drinking to get drunk, drinking with the intention of getting tossed, of getting inebriated, of getting complete lit, that in itself is not a favorable action, right? And I can say again, I've been there, done that. When I was in college, listen, our goal was to get to it. Our goal was to get as lit as possible, and then we just maintain it for the rest of the night, right? That was our goal. It wasn't right. I did it, and by the grace of God, I'm still here. But if you choose to consume alcohol, you have to be mindful of your volume. Because again, if you enjoy a glass of wine, or you have a wine pairing with your dinner, or you enjoy a craft cocktail or a craft beer here or there, listen, there's nothing illegal about it, but you must be mindful of volume, because as it pertains to the consumption of alcohol, there's a diminishing margin of return. And we all know that. You can basically get over a certain level in which it's like, yo, there's no more benefit. It's all downside from there, right? And then you got to think about it. Your body ain't designed to take in a whole lot of alcohol. So if you choose to have a beverage or two, that's it. But be very mindful of your volume, because there is a diminishing margin of return in consuming over a certain level. So source, company you keep, volume. The last thing I want to share with you is environment. There are obviously laws in the United States about drinking and driving, or drinking and operating vehicles, or whatnot. You have to be mindful of the environments that you're in, because every environment is not conducive to you consuming alcohol. And that's something that we have to be mindful of. Again, alcohol is not a requirement to have a good time. If we're honest about it, there are a lot of cultural messages that have been placed on us that make us think that we gotta have a few drinks to have a good time. But the reality is, and this is something that, again, in my 40s now, mid 40s, actually I'm closer to 50 than I am 40, ironically. It's interesting to think about how if you do things and you're not inebriated, and these are things that you used to do back in the day in which you had to get good and drunk to have a good time, you come to realize that if you're not drunk or you're not, kind of tipsy, you're not having a good time. And for me, the aha moment was, why do I spend time in places or with people if the only way or the only time I can enjoy myself is if I'm drunk or, halfway lit? Like, it was crazy. Like, it was such a waste of my time. And so my whole thing is, again, if I choose to have a cocktail, I choose to have a cocktail because I enjoy a cocktail. Or if we're in the Caribbean, listen, there's going to be some rum punch that will be consumed if we're in the Caribbean. That's what we do if my wife and I go and we're on vacation. But the thing is, I'm not putting myself in environments that I would not enjoy if I were not inebriated. Because to me, that's a waste of time. I'm not putting myself around people that I have to get drunk to be able to deal with. That's a waste of my time. Like, life is way too precious to waste it on events, circumstances, and situations and people that honestly would not be worth your time unless you were sitting on tilt. You dig what I'm saying? So again, substances have the ability to completely warp and derail your mindset. Be very mindful of the consumption of them. And I'm talking specifically alcohol. There are other substances that people consume on a regular basis. That's completely out of my lane, right? But as it pertains to alcohol, you have to be very careful. And if you choose to make the decision to consume alcohol periodically, you probably shouldn't do it that often. But if you choose to do so periodically, ask yourself or make sure you're aware of these four things: the source, the company you keep, who's around you, the volume of the drink that you're consuming, and finally, the environment that you're in. And if you can really be mindful of those four things, if you choose to go down that rabbit hole, you might put yourself in a better position to be in control of your mindset. But we all know the best situation is to be completely of clear mind and body so that you can then operate from a place of clarity, purpose, and move in the right direction and not be clouded in how you operate. So this is Mike D, man, Coach Mike D. I'm here with the Mindset QB. I'm not your Mindset QB. I'm here to encourage and inspire you to become the quarterback of your own mindset. Y'all be blessed, well, and wise. Have an amazing day, and I'll holler at you. Peace.